Hello and welcome. I'm Vita Flores, your moderator today, a member of the League of Women Voters of Marin County. Our timekeeper is Susan Stomp, right here in front. We're collecting questions from the audience, and we appreciate you printing legibly. And as our friend Ann Laser always says, penmanship counts. So briefly address the issues and that are applicable for both candidates. There are two candidates running for one seat with a 4-year term for the Board of Supervisors, District 3. Susan Kirsch to my left and Kate Sears to my right. The candidates have been invited to make an opening statement of 2 minutes each. We'll begin with Susan Kirsch, then Kate Sears. Ready?
Yes. So, and I think I'll stand just because it feels more comfortable to see the rest of the audience if I'm standing. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event with your great reputation for all you do, and all of you who have come out today to be able to be more informed about what the choices are when you either cast your absentee ballot or vote in June. I did a little research about the League of Women Voters just to find out that it was started in 1920. And a part of it was it came to be after a 72-year struggle for women's voting rights, which I think it's interesting to look out in this audience and see how many of us in this audience are still women. And I was especially taken by one of the lines that described the League of Women Voters as saying, it's been an activist, grassroots organization whose leaders believed that citizens should play a critical role in advocacy. And I like that statement because it seems so much to describe why I'm running for the Board of Supervisors. So just to give you a little bit about my background, professionally, I come to this from having been a teacher, an educational researcher, an executive director, and most recently someone with my own sole proprietorship business working with nonprofit organizations. My community leadership started in my own backyard, in my neighborhoods. Then I started Friends of Mill Valley. That grew to be an organization county-wide called Citizen Marin. And in addition to that, I'm now chair of the Marin Coalition, a 40-year-old organization that looks at topics of importance to the county. I've lived in Marin for 36 years. I raised my 2 children here who went through public school. I'm running on a platform to be able to bring greater transparency, fiscal accountability, and this concept of citizen advocacy to representing you on the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kate?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My family moved to Mill Valley 60 years ago in 1955, and then to Sausalito in 1965. I went to Marin Country Day School and graduated from Tam High in the class of 1969. My parents were both environmental activists, and they were very engaged in public service, and they taught me those values that I've carried with me throughout my life. So prior to becoming your supervisor in June of 2011, I was a lawyer for 22 years. For the last nearly 6 of those years, I was with the California Attorney General's Office in the Consumer Law Section in San Francisco, and I'm very proud to have been the lead lawyer in the first lawsuit filed against Countrywide Bank for predatory lending that resulted in an $8.6 billion nationwide settlement. So I've been your county supervisor now for Southern Marin for almost 5 years, and I've been very busy. I've been a leader in raising awareness of the impact of sea level rise, and I'm currently working with our cities and towns along the bay to assess our vulnerability to sea level rise and also address our flooding issues and prepare for our future. I'm working to take care of our aging community through the Aging Action Initiative to support healthy aging, social engagement, and the ability to live in one's home for one's entire life, if possible. I've worked hard to address traffic issues, and I'm sure many of you are going to want to talk about that subject because it's something that's important to all of us, but I've worked hard to address those issues at Tam Junction and Muir Woods, and I'm collaborating closely with the City of Mill Valley on addressing issues on East Blythedale, the 101 Overpass, and Tiburon Boulevard. And I'm working hard to manage development wisely in a context of a housing affordability crisis that we have here in Marin. I also chair Marin Clean Energy, and I'm very proud of the progress that we've made of bringing renewable energy here to Marin, to Napa County, and to Richmond, and to building renewable energy sites right here in our county and in Richmond. And I've worked hard with my colleagues, and now I'm stopping. So we'll talk about all of these issues more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our first question will be 2 minutes, and it will be posed to Kate Sears. And we'll start by talking about Measure AA, everyone's favorite. So what would you propose as an alternate to protecting the Bay? Do you support Measure AA, pros and cons, and how would you accomplish your objectives?
Thank you very much. So I've spent a lot of time since I've been in office working on sea level rise, and I also serve on the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. And I'm a strong proponent of Measure AA. This is a very important measure because it's up for a vote of the residents of all 9 counties around our San Francisco Bay. And one of the reasons it's important is that people who study sea level rise say one of the impediments to really getting anything done is our difficulties in collaborating across jurisdictions. This will be the first time that there has been a multi-county effort to come together and to find a good and substantial future income stream to support wetlands maintenance and restoration and the quality of our water. We have to make this step. There's no one source of money that can solve all of our sea level rise and climate change problems. But this is a very important step forward, and I also believe that we can use the proceeds of Measure AA, should it pass, to leverage more support from the private sector to do their share, their substantial share, in making sure that we are adequately addressing sea level rise. We have a number of projects ready to go for funding. With the proceeds on Measure AA. We have 2 folks from our community here in Southern Marin who serve on the advisory committee to Measure AA. One of those is Roger Leventhal, our flood control engineer at the county, who's an expert on sea level rise. And he's identified a number of projects, both in Southern Marin, but also at the Hamilton Wetlands Restoration Project and elsewhere in Marin County that I think will be very strong candidates for funding through Measure AA. So I think this is an important measure for all of us to support. I think it's an important step forward on our future. It will not stop us from pursuing other ways to address sea level rise, but it's going to be a very important linchpin of addressing our future.
Thank you.
So I am a big fan of the Bay. I totally believe in the idea of restoration of the Bay. I believe that we need to do everything we can to protect the Bay. But this measure is a faulty measure in terms of the strategy that it's using to go about to protect the Bay. 6 weeks ago or so, I wrote the Marin Voice piece that was urging people to vote no on Measure A. And here were some of the reasons that I raised in that article that you can still find on the Marin IJ if you want to go into detail. The first thing about this measure is that while it's true, it's called a $12 parcel tax, and we can think $1 a month, what's that going to mean for any of us in terms of our own well-being? But one of the things to be aware of with this tax is that it's the same $12 that we as a property owner would pay, which is the same $12 that Chevron, who's probably had a much bigger contribution to the pollution of the Bay than any of us have they'll pay $12, as well as Apple and Google and the Chase Bank down in Silicon Valley, who will have much greater risk of flooding to their properties than many of us do here. So there's a basic problem with the flaw in by the fact that everybody pays the same basic parcel tax. It should be more fairly distributed. The second major flaw is that this is an organization that is administered by the San Francisco Bay Authority, where Marin has no representation on that board. It's currently a 7-member board for administering a project that is supposed to serve all of the 9-county Bay Area. And it's a board that's currently appointed by the Association of Bay Area Governments, which, if you're following that, we can predict that within the next 6 months or so less, ABAG will be incorporated and rolled into MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So the power of that is also does not bode well in terms of local control. And in fact, this is another regional agency that will undermine our chance to determine our future.
Ready?
Do you have another one you want me to start again?
I will have Susan start. And we'll continue a question on Measure AA. This was submitted to us online.
Okay.
And Susan will begin. If Measure AA passes, what will you do to ensure funds are allocated to Marin watershed projects?
Oh, well, that's a great question, because the way it's set up, it will be there will be the advisory. There will be the board of the Restoration Authority. Money will be distributed not according to the counties, but according to 4 quadrants. So we are further removed from getting money by the fact that the money will go to the north, south, east, and west. I anticipate that there will be very little money that will actually come to Marin because of the way that the organization is shaped. I think we would do best by being able to continue to support those agencies here in Marin that have done such good work. The Audubon, the Sierra Club, the Bay Keepers, all of the organizations that already have structures that have shown that they know what the greatest needs are and they know how to address those needs. The layers of bureaucracy that we will have to deal with Measure AA are going to be as difficult as it is to get traffic solutions working with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So while, I will do everything I could to try to get that money, I just think it is the chances of having money come to Marin, it's going to be a really tough battle.
So thank you. So the ballot measure AA specifically provides that half of the monies that are approved, if authorized, will go to the 9 counties. They are in 4 areas, the North Bay being one of them. But each area will receive a specific allocation of monies based on its percentage of the population. So the North Bay, that's Sonoma County and Marin County, will get 9%. And the other 50% of the funds that are raised by Measure AA are available to allocation to projects. And I think it's very important, as I said earlier, to have projects that are ready to be funded, which we have in Marin. So as I said earlier, we have 2 members from Marin who are on the advisory committee. One of them is our county flood control engineer, Roger Leventhal. The other is Bruce Rafel, who is very active in our community here in southern Marin. We also, currently the North Bay representative is from the county of Napa. His term is coming up at the end of this year, and I'm certainly going to apply to replace him on that authority. I think that it's very important that we all be active when this measure passes, and I'm confident it will, to make sure that we are doing the best that we can to promote our projects and have an influence on the folks who will be doing the decision making. But I think that we are very well positioned with the kinds of input that we can have, the specific allocations that are established in the measure, and with the projects, the kinds of projects we have. The largest sea level rise impacts around the Bay are Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Marin County. The folks who work on sea level rise are very aware of that. The expansion of the Hamilton Wetlands Restoration is one of the largest projects in the Bay Area. I think we have very strong candidates for funding to make sure a large percent of the money from Measure AA comes right here to our county.
You can find more information on this regional Measure AA on our website, marinlwv.org. We'll continue with the environment. Please provide your understanding of ongoing efforts to protect and enhance Marin's watershed. What, in your opinion, are the most pressing watershed-related issues, and how might you help to address those issues?
Thanks very much. Well, so our county watershed program has developed a fantastic guide for southern Marin that looks at each of our watersheds in great detail to study how the water is moving down our watersheds to the bay, and also marrying that up with an analysis of sea level rise to make sure that we know exactly how our waters are moving in our county so we can prepare adequately and we can make appropriate changes that actually deal with our flooding concerns. So there's certain areas such as Coyote Creek over in Tennessee Valley, that is a prime example of water coming down from the hills, at least when we're not in a drought situation, and water coming up from the bay and sea level rise. And we are looking very specifically, we have a Richardson Bay study that has looked at the kinds of alternative measures that we want to be considering to deal with the water coming down into Coyote Creek and the water coming up, whether that's levee enhancements or it's other kinds of wetlands restoration. We've also applied for money and obtained that money to do sediment enhancement in Bothene Marsh that will deal with our water coming in, particularly from sea level rise. But the county is not just looking at southern Marin. These watershed studies look at all of our watersheds, including some of the very important watersheds in Novato that currently, if they can be restored, and a lot of the paving over that was done in the 40s, reversed, there's a lot of steps that we can take to enhance our management of water all over. So the goal is to make sure that we are adequately addressing those areas in our county where we have flooding issues right now, but also planning forward to make sure that we understand how our water flows and that we are working together to come up with the right kinds of solutions, adaptation measures, so that we're addressing water as it rises with sea level rise.
So, thank you. One of the things that I did in this last year was to join the Environmental Forum of Marin, where there was an opportunity to study and look at the Marin watershed. And one of the sessions that was especially powerful was going out to be out in Muir Woods and be able to see the model that's a scale model, and to see what happens as one of the rangers had an equivalent amount of rainfall and poured it at the top of the mountain so that we could all witness how the water flows down into all parts of Marin County. And if you ever have a chance to be out at Muir Woods, it's really an important teaching tool to be able to see that the water that starts at the top of the mountain comes down and nourishes and supports and keeps our county vital and beautiful in so many ways. And it makes it really clear that all of our communities are connected with our water supply, and that we can be so grateful for what happens with MMWD and all the acreage that's protected for us, through the watershed that they look out for. And you can also see the little tributaries of the way the water comes into our third district, including, Coyote Creek and the bay and the marshlands. So I think what we need to do is to continue to be really conscious of how we are treating our air and our water to be able to maintain purity of those systems. And I think we've all become more conscious over the last period of the drought, of being conscious of how we conserve water. We've become much better in terms of looking at how we maintain the quality of the water for salmon and for other organisms in the watershed, and we need to continue to keep those practices strong.
Marin is an aging and active community, and we love our open space. What more can be done to ease conflicts from the many different users of the open space and the multi-use trails? And we're going to start this way. Yes.
Aging and open space. Well, it's a pleasure to address that topic, since my walking partner is sitting here in the audience, and it's one of the things that we deal with when we're out on the Richardson Bay bike path and walking in the area around Richardson Bay, and understanding how much that multi-use path gets used, and it gets used by so many different people, that it's used by seniors who are out with their walkers, and it's used by the kids who are riding their bikes to or from school. It's sometimes occupied by the people who seem to be out in a marathon to win a bicycle race. And what's true on that bike path, as she and I are just kind of walking along at our own moderate rate, is that there needs to be safety provisions for everybody who's using our open space. And, that's true for everyone. I think it's not just strictly for seniors. But so the question in terms of aging and open space, I think we need to continue to look at how any of us as seniors have opportunities to be out into the open spaces. We need opportunities for transportation to get us to the places where we can enjoy parkland and open space. I'm transitioning a little into just thinking about transportation, which I know is not part of this question. So, open space, I guess my final thing about this will be just thinking of my own backyard space and how much I personally, and anticipating for all of us, understand the healing qualities of open space, and thinking that we have an important responsibility as we make decisions to maintain as many of the open spaces as possible just as I'm sitting here, I can look out to the vista out that window and understanding how we're all healed and sustained and invigorated with having open space and the need for that as we age.
So when I told you my family moved to Mill Valley in 1955, and we lived way up on the mountain on Tamalpais Avenue, close to Summit. So we could walk out our front door and walk onto the fire roads, onto the Mount Tam, and just hike everywhere. So I grew up as a kid hiking and riding horses on Mount Tam. As I'm aging, I still like to hike. I biked more when I was a young person, but I do that less now. And the issues of aging and conflicts between our various users and making sure that we're all safe and have the kind of outdoor opportunities that we all want is very important for our county. We've spent a lot of time the last year and a half looking at issues on the Mill Valley Sausalito multi-use pathway and making sure that our user groups were interacting with each other as best as they could. Part of that was slowing down the folks on bikes who wanted to go fast and really making sure that everyone was aware of each other. And I think you probably saw the campaign with the little lollipops to draw people's attention to each other and remember that there are a variety of users. On our other trails in open space, we've periodically had challenges between folks on foot and those on bikes and equestrians. And that led to a great collaboration of our bikers, our hikers, and our equestrians called Slow Down and Say Hello. Again, to get people to acknowledge each other and also have the experience of being in each other's shoes, literally. So there have been great programs with equestrians and bikers so they could each see how the other operated in the open space. It's also, our age-friendly Sausalito program is also bringing in sort of exercise equipment for those of us who are not so young in our MLK Park, which I think is great. We have so many parks for young people. We need to expand our parks for those of us who are over 60. And another piece of it is making sure our communities are connected to open space. And so we're working on building trails and connectors for this community, Marin City, which has the benefit, the incredible privilege of being right next to our GGNRA. But we want to make sure that there are actually connectors so people can get out there and hike, and we're working on that.
Very good. Speaking of green, our next question will be about medical marijuana. We've got several questions. What is your position regarding the legalization of recreational marijuana, and would you support increasing the number of medical marijuana dispensaries in the county?
Well, I certainly think medical marijuana could make us feel all better while we're out there recreating in the open space. But our Board of Supervisors has a subcommittee that's worked hard for the last 9 months in developing an ordinance to really govern medical marijuana. We have a lot of people in our community who have told us about the medical benefits and their desire to have access to medical marijuana. But with an eye to the future and the expectation that recreational marijuana may be approved on the ballot in November, we don't know for sure, we really wanted to get an infrastructure, if you will, in place through an ordinance that governs medical marijuana. So it limits the number of locations. We can have only 2 here on the 101 corridor and 2 locations out in West Marin. And we're actually this Tuesday going to be finalizing some of the fine points of how what the application process will be. We already set out very strict criteria to make sure that those operations are handled in a very responsible way that don't impact our young people. We have, as you know, I'm sure, hotspots of alcohol abuse and also prescription drug abuse here in Marin, and we want to make sure that we continue to address those issues the best we can without jeopardizing the progress that's been made on that front by sort of a Wild West free-for-all on recreational marijuana. So I think it's important that we have the structure in place for the medical marijuana piece. I think it's very important we have our community partnerships dealing with our prescription drug abuse. We have RX Safe Marin. We have some structures in place that I'm hopeful will provide a framework if, in fact, recreational marijuana is improved in the fall, so that we don't have what some people fear of an impact on our young people and encouragement of use that's inappropriate.
So again, looking around this audience, I can see that many of us probably grew up in an era when we can remember when it was really, forbidden to be using any kind of mind-altering substance like marijuana. And we can probably also think of how much we know that there were draconian measures in terms of especially some youthful users where it became kind of going from poverty to prison because we had such harsh sentencing for people who were using marijuana. And so I think we're making really good progress in terms of knowing that we're no longer living under those kinds of bizarre rules that were really harmful to so many young people. I think it's a great step that we've moved to have medical marijuana approved, and that is a possibility. That we're looking at sites for that. I have to say, I think it's a little, we're in kind of a catch-22 by the fact that it's still federally it's illegal. And so I would like to see sometime that we will end up having a parallel path so that if you need a medical prescription, you can as likely go to CVS or Long's Drug or a drugstore to be able to get what you need as a marijuana prescription, rather than creating these kind of separate, mysterious kinds of places where people currently go for their medical marijuana. In terms of recreational use, some of you might have seen, when I was interviewed in the IJA, I expressed opposition to the recreational use. And just to clarify that a little bit, probably, again, many of us might remember the people who have been in our own lives who were not so disciplined or not so lucky and have had adverse effects for using marijuana. I can think of friends of my children who were not so disciplined, who have had adverse effects. So I think that we have reasons to be really cautious about what is a very powerful drug that we know from science and from experience or from the stories of the people who are around us. And we need not go to the draconian methods of making it so illegal that people's lives are ruined, but we need to find a better balance so that we have safety for its use as well as the medical use that's already been approved.
This next question comes from a concerned resident of Marin City, and they're concerned that there's only one entrance and exit here in this community. And our other online question is related to that. What are your thoughts regarding flood control and measures to control it here in Marin County?
Should we start here last time?
We're going to start here.
Okay. We'll bounce it back and forth. Actually, Marin City is an interesting, it's a good question since we're here in Marin City and we all know how we had the one way to come in here. The truth is many of our communities are in a similar kind of situation where we have just one or two entrances or exits to get into our cities. In terms of the flooding, the issue here is a similar issue to flooding and the challenges that people in Manzanita face about flooding. It seems like what we need is something of a balance between looking at that long range, with a long range vision about what we do about sea level rise or more drastic storms that we're dealing with, and how we find the funding or find the creativity to take care of those immediate challenges that we have, like flooding in Manzanita or flooding here in Marin City. And I'm sure, there's the possibility of bringing in the engineers and building the budgets and weighing the options for what's possible to be able to assure that there is easy access, whatever the storms, whatever the environmental damage that would be coming along, so that people have disaster preparedness plans that enable them to get help if there is, a environmental emergency.
So as part of the watershed work that the county has been doing, one of the watersheds that our staff, our engineers have looked at very carefully is this watershed right here, right where we're sitting, to look at where the water is moving. And that's told us a lot about the flooding challenges in this community. So there's a couple of different areas here that are attention of future work and remedy. One of them are the pipes that go right underneath this shopping center that is private property. And so our staff has been working with the owners of this shopping center to get permission to be able to send cameras in and see what the state of those drainage pipes under this shopping center right here are, so that our staff and the shopping owners, center owners, can work together to figure out a solution. We're also working on making sure that the drainage, the pipes that carry the water right by the Marin City Sausalito off-ramp are improved, and that's currently on our Department of Public Works plan to make sure that we don't have the kind of flooding that we did here in December of 2014 that essentially closed off this community. The temporary barriers that you see right along this side of the shopping center by the lagoon, those are barriers filled with water that were put up by the shopping center owners that have helped control the waters keep them from coming into this community during the rainstorms that we had this year. I'm also working closely with Caltrans to address flooding at Manzanita and Pohono. For a while, Caltrans would say the only solution to that is to raise the Richardson Bay Bridge, which was a little hard to believe because it seemed like there was plenty of room there to do that, and it also is a huge capital project. And about 6 weeks ago, I sat down with our Caltrans representative, Bijan Sartipi, and our head of Department of Public Works, and I said to Caltrans, when you say things like that, it makes us feel like you're not serious in trying to work with us and solve our problems. What we want to find are solutions that are perhaps not 100% for that flooding, but are 75 or 80%. Let's talk about short-term measures that will be effective to alleviate some, as much as we can, of the flooding at Manzanita and Pohono. And it was like a light bulb went off with our Caltrans rep, and in fact, the very next day, his staff got together with our engineering staff. They walked Manzanita, Pohono, and they started really having a substantive conversation about what can we do to try to alleviate our problems. So we have measures in the works.
We have a multi-part question on transportation, and we'll start with Kate on this side.
Okay.
And how would you assess the state of Marin's infrastructure, and how would you address the increasing traffic congestion, followed by how might we better ensure adequate infrastructure in the future?
All right, so this is like a 5-minute question.
Yeah.
So let me start with the infrastructure. We have some significant challenges on our road quality. You know, in unincorporated Marin, we have, I think it's 412 miles of roads, centerline roads that we're responsible for. Those roads, on an average, have a pavement condition index, PCI, of 60 on a scale from 0 to 100. It could be worse, but it's not very good. To keep that level, right at that 60 level, we need to be spending $8 to $11 million a year. If we want to actually move the dial, we need serious money. We need $13 to $15 million a year. Our Board of Supervisors has been working every year to put additional monies into our road repair and our bridge repair budget. And so if we have more money than we anticipate because we're conservative in projecting for the future, we take half of those additional monies and we put it into our road condition budget so we can make progress on improving our roads. We need money from the state to really move the dial. So that's part of it. Our traffic is a challenge, right? And part of that challenge is there's too many cars on the road. Our existing infrastructure is not wide enough. Our roads are not large enough to handle the cars that we have, but we also have an affordability crisis. So many of our employees at the county, our employees in businesses across the county, I was just talking with the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce earlier this week, and they were talking about the challenges for their employees. When people have to commute into their jobs, that obviously is a challenge for our traffic. And so coming up with some solutions, there's no one big solution for traffic or for housing affordability, but coming up with incremental measures to increase our supply of affordable housing, such as our county is focusing on acquiring and maintaining the affordable housing we have, and also looking for opportunities to take our existing buildings and convert to affordable housing. and I have to stop. We'll come back to that question, I think.
So I was at a meeting of the Mill Valley Neighborhood Association leaders the other night where John McCauley, our mayor, was talking about road repairs and the importance of thinking about road repairs, saying we can kind of go along on a plateau and roads start getting a little bit worse, and the best time to start making improvements is where you just start noticing that there is a need for some repair, that if you wait beyond that and start seeing the potholes getting deeper and deeper and the conditions getting worse and worse, your costs of repairing that are going to drastically increase. So you want to keep a steady line at having the money to make those repairs. The thing I want to really focus on is the issue of traffic, and saying that one of the basic ways that we need to deal with traffic is to make decisions that don't make traffic worse. And so one of the things that we have in this county where many of us are stuck in traffic far too often, we often can think that just one more car on the road is one car too many. In a decision that my opponent made on April 12th was to be able to approve a project that is not just one more car on the road, but is approving 600 more cars a day to be on the roadway by Strawberry, either going to 101 coming south or working its way up to the freeway to Highway 131. So there's a big problem in terms of trying to have it both ways, of talking about how we must address traffic and the problems with traffic, and then making such an intentional decision against the wishes of the community to be able to add that many more cars a day, and knowing that that opens up the way for there to be even still more cars, and that it's not taking into account other projects that are proposed for the county, as in the seminary project, which is predicted to add another 6,500 cars to the roadways. So our traffic is really a big issue, and we need to get a handle on that, or we're going to all be stuck in gridlock far more than we ever want to be.
The Bay Area is in the midst of a housing crisis, California as well as Marin County. And do you support, and this will go to Susan, do you support affordable housing as here in Marin County, and especially senior affordable housing?
Well, absolutely. I support affordable housing, and I think it's important that we think about housing having a range of options so that the healthiest communities are those communities that have housing at all levels. So, but one of the things that we have that we're facing here in the 3rd District alone, based on the kinds of decisions that have been moving forward with our current supervisor, is that the 3rd District is at risk of losing 500 units of affordable housing. That breaks down to be the 300 units at Golden Gate Village, where there is a plan, a working group that met, where there's the looking at the possibility of a transformation, a revitalization for Marin City. And in addition to that, the seminary project, which includes both Branson and building, tearing down 200 units of former faculty student housing that were a part of the Baptist Seminary. The idea is to tear those buildings down and to replace them with 304 market rate rental housing units. Now, some of that, 20%, I think, is intended to be senior housing up in a remote kind of area where at least currently there are no services in that area. So when we're looking at affordable housing or any housing, first of all, what we need to do is preserve what we already have. Building new will never provide us affordable housing at the way in which we want to think of affordable for people making, the gardeners, the teachers, the people who are often named as needing affordable housing. So we need to preserve. It's true we need to acquire, which is another one of the strategies that's currently being talked about. The language that goes with the acquisition is to say that the acquisition would be deed-restricted housing. But what my opponent has done is to have deed-restricted...
Thank you, Susan.
Okay, I'll finish that thought later.
So I strongly support affordable housing, both for families and for seniors. And I also think it's important to get your facts right. So it's not true that we stand to lose 500 units of affordable housing here in Southern Marin. It is true that there's been a stakeholders group that's been working for a year to talk about the public housing at Golden Gate Village, which is federal property supported by federal dollars from HUD. That's not a sustainable income stream, and it's very important that we find a sustainable future for that housing. Whatever happens there, and that's by no means decided, whatever happens, there will be one-for-one replacement for everyone who lives there, so no one will be displaced. This is something I feel very strongly about, and I'm certain that we can make happen. Even if there is new housing, there's ways to stage it so that you can build new housing, you don't disrupt anyone living on that property, they move right into the new housing. You can do redevelopment, you can do building, rehabilitation in phases. So that's not true that we're going to lose 500 or 300 here. We're also not going to lose affordable housing on Seminary. The owners of that property have put in an application for what they'd like to do. It's the beginning of the conversation. One of the things that they have proposed is to put in rental housing, rental units. That's their business model. The county has a 20% affordability. That's the minimum that we require in new development projects. That minimum does not apply to rental housing. But the owners of the Seminary property have said, we want to have at least 20% of affordable housing on that property. So there will not be a loss of affordable property there either. It's also this bogeyman about putting 600 cars on the road from the Board of Supervisors' decision to approve 25,000 square feet of medical office buildings at Belvedere Place is also not set in context. Think about how many car trips a day there are with the grocery store, the Safeway in Strawberry. A number needs a context.
Homelessness has an impact on all of Marin County. What are your priorities for solving this problem? Please be specific.
Thank you very much. So this is a very important issue, and as we all know, and our Board of Supervisors has a subcommittee on homelessness that has been working for the last couple of years very closely with the city of San Rafael to find a solution. And one of the things that we have been talking about is to find a location for a homeless shelter and for more transitional housing. This has been a challenging conversation, like so many of the conversations about affordable housing, because once you start talking about a specific location, concerns are raised about that's not the right place. And this has been ongoing pushback from the city of San Rafael. Our Board of Supervisors believes very strongly we need to have housing, transitional housing for our homeless. We need to have job creation so that folks who are homeless have a way out of homelessness. There's many reasons people fall into homelessness. Many times it's loss of a job. And we also believe that a location for a homeless shelter and transitional housing should be close to services. So if people who are homeless and have other challenges, whether it's mental health, it's drug or alcohol abuse, have the services they need close by. These conversations have progressed. And it's my understanding that there's 2 locations in San Rafael that are being discussed very, very seriously. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to make progress on having a shelter. We obviously need a location where there is transportation and that people can get to the services they need. The conversations currently, because of San Rafael's concerns about Ritter and some of the impact in their downtown, Ritter would be moving to this new location. So the goal has been to really try to address some of the concerns that San Rafael and the downtown businesses have had, but find a location that provides the housing, the services, and the potential for employment that people need. There was just a wonderful event earlier this week sponsored by the San Rafael Chamber called Demythologizing, Busting the Myths About Homelessness, and a great group of members of the Downtown Streets teams and people from all over our county went out and picked up trash and worked together, and it's those kinds of collaborations that we need.
A lot of what I learned about homelessness and dealing with the issue of homelessness was when I worked in San Francisco at an agency called the Tenderloin Neighborhood Development Corporation. And a part of the model that they worked with that's a model that I think we need to continue to look closely at, was for people who had been experiencing homelessness. And it was a fact that they were combining then affordable housing support services for those people, with social workers being a part of the organizational structure, and in addition to that, doing jobs training for people to be able to get out and get back on their feet. But what was surprising to me and to many of the other people who worked there was how, for some people living in homelessness, that was either related to post-traumatic stress that had never been dealt with, people with drug or alcohol problems, or some people who were at a turning point because they had lost a job and blown through all of their savings. There's different kinds of people who have different kinds of needs when it comes to homelessness. And so this was an agency that was set up to be able to both assess those needs and then to look at what kinds of solutions they could offer for people coming in to get affordable housing. I think we need to do something similar to that as we think of moving forward. One of the things that was that one of the groups that studied this issue of homelessness was the civil grand jury in this last study period, looked at the issue of homelessness, and one of their recommendations is that the county would appoint someone to be a head of homelessness to be able to do a better job of pulling all of the services that are currently being funded through our county mental health and human services, and get a better grip on how those services are being delivered so that there's a coordinated effort and that the services that people really need are being delivered.
What's your position on rent control in Marin County, Susan?
On rent control, well, what I understand from the people who I know who own properties and have been following this very closely, I personally don't own any property but my own, is that rent control is something that they find really worrisome to them, because what they have witnessed and what I understand would be true is that when rent control kicks in, property owners will either do a big spike of their rents before the application date actually comes to bear, knowing that they're going to be stuck with having to draw money out to do repairs where they can never raise the rent. So there's a kind of real just a lack of how market and how needs interact. And we can all know from our own experiences of when, we need to call a plumber, or we need to have a leaky roof, or we have an electrician that we need to call someone in. And the fact that those are expenses that a property owner is put at risk of then not maintaining a property if they don't have the cash flow to do that. I mean, we actually have that is a part of what's playing out here in Golden Gate Village, where the county has acquired $16 million of deferred maintenance because they haven't had the money, because HUD hasn't provided the money, because expenses have been too high. So the property keeps falling into disrepair, and that is a part of why the working group had spent a whole lot of time looking at what the options are for revitalizing and reforming the Golden Gate Village. So I think there are too many downsides to rent control, and I don't support rent control as one of the ways that we get a handle on how do we keep it affordable to live in Marin.
So our county had a series of 4 workshops on our housing crisis, and we had people came in from all over the county to really talk about the incredible challenges, the fear that a lot of our residents faced about would their rent get raised and would they be able to stay in the home where they'd lived for a long time. We really have an affordability crisis out in West Marin. The people in Marshall and Tamales are so challenged by vacation homes and the rising rents that it's a desperate situation now. Is a very sobering conversation. A lot of those voices called strongly for having rent control and some help to try to alleviate their fears about their future and ability to live here. So, and we took a very close look at all of those issues, and we looked at a variety of issues. I personally lived in Manhattan in the 1980s, and I saw the impacts of rent control in that city and some of the New York boroughs, where properties were not maintained in an effort to drive the current tenants out of their buildings. So I'm concerned about the potential downsides of rent control. I do think, however, that there's other measures we can do. One of the things that we're working on, it was an inspiration through my new colleague Damon Conley, who'd been on the San Rafael City Council, and programs that they had really had to encourage landlords to not do significant increases in rent for their properties, and really to set an example. We had a lot of landlords come in during our workshops and say, I manage my properties responsibly. I would never engage in those kinds of steep rent hikes. I think there's a role there for people working together to set a good example. We're also working with Marin Housing Authority to increase the number of landlords who take Section 8 vouchers, so that we do expand those opportunities for people who are at the lowest level and the greatest level of need for assistance from their rent. But I don't see rent control as a solution. I think there's other ways we need to get at the problem.
The next question for Kate. Please provide your thoughts regarding solutions for payment of the unfunded pension and retiree health liability in Marin.
Thank you very much. So this is an issue that our board takes very seriously, and over the last 4 years we have put $94 million over and above what our baseline obligations are each year to try to pay down and move forward in reducing our pension and retiree health care liability. In 2013, we created a retiree health care trust fund that meant that we saved $50 million in 2015 alone, and it fully funds our health care obligations going forward. My view is we need to manage these issues responsibly. There's a lot of talk about the retirees from different agencies around the county who have such huge pensions. But the average for our county employees is around $40,000. This is not a huge amount of money, and it's an important part of our compensation package and being able to retain and recruit quality employees. So I think we need to be fiscally responsible. I think we've been taking important steps as a county to each year put in additional monies, millions of dollars above and beyond. We're doing this in our current 2-year budget that we've just started talking about. There will be additional monies put in for health care and pension. We're being responsible, but we also need to take care of our employees and be mindful of how we sustain a good workforce going forward. We have had some of our recruitments already where people have said, your compensation package, particularly in terms of health care, is not where it should be. I also feel strongly that compassion plays a role in being your supervisor. I think my opponent has said that she believes that we should take away retiree health care. I do not agree with that. I don't think we take health care away from people when they are most vulnerable. We need to balance out fiscal responsibility with care of our employees. And state law has also helped us out on dealing with some of the worst abuses of pension spiking, et cetera.
Well, let me start out to say, I have not said that health care should be taken away from people. What I have said is that I think that it's important that we look to get a better balance between the people who are making the greatest amount of money having responsibility for paying the greatest amount towards their health care. As people make less money, there should be a proportional increase in terms of providing health care coverage. So it is not that the health care should be taken away. The other thing that I want to make really clear is that in terms of rank and file workers, the people who are making an average of $40,000 in their retirement, is not the target and is not the focus of those people who I talk to who are really concerned about pension and pension liability. And there are a number of retirees in Marin County who had, during the early 2000s, what were called enhancements to their pension benefits, which are costing those of us who are bearing the burden for paying their retirements in the $100,000, $200,000, and $300,000 a year retirement packages is falling to the rest of us. And the big problem with that is that as we're paying people who are now retired and golfing or traveling or whatever they do, it's taking away the money that could be used for flood mitigation or for traffic or for affordable housing. It's also the money that means we could keep the libraries open longer and provide better services. So in terms of the questions about what could be done to make pension and help solve our pension problem, understanding it's going to be 25 or 30 years before it's solved, because there's no going back to undo the pensions that have been promised. But we can work towards putting a cap on pensions. People are talking about $100,000 or $130,000 cap, so nobody makes more than that. And we can increase the retirement age, and there's other strategies that we can take.
Mm-hmm. If elected during your next supervisorial term, how do you plan to affect improving equity in Marin? The portrait of Marin gives ample evidence that our county is lacking in the spirit of welcome for people of color and the poor. What will you do to right this wrong?
So, well, I hope to be elected and to be able to take on this challenge. And I think a part of what we need to look at for the equity is really how we create enough room at the table for everybody to come and participate. I was thinking about this a while ago in terms of looking at how it is that we have great wealth and great creativity and opportunity here in Marin, and great beauty, and it's a part of what we want to preserve. And because I was the former executive director of the American Sports Institute, I often think of things in terms of sports metaphors. So a part of what we have, I think, is an understanding that there is, that not everyone ends up playing with the San Francisco Giants baseball team, and we don't all play, everybody doesn't make it to play with the 49ers. But we have a lot of sports opportunities for people to come in to start practicing and start gaining the kinds of skills to excel and move on as far as they can. And to create a more caring Marin, what we need are more opportunities where we're offering a hand to people, where we're offering education and employment and opportunities to learn the skills that if they have the capacity to become the NFL player or the major league player, that opportunity unfolds, and that everyone has that opportunity to find that place where they flourish and where they both are most empowered themselves to live the life and the purpose that they dream of, as well as being strong contributors to the fabric of the rest of the culture. I don't think we gain by providing the handouts. We gain as a community by being able to discover those ways in which we give a hand up and help everyone be part of this American dream.
So I was on the board subcommittee that worked with leaders both inside our county and also outside the county to develop a 5-year business plan for our county. And a key part of that 5-year business plan is equity. And one of the things that we want to do as a county is start with ourselves. And we want to have the conversation outside our county, but we really want to start with ourselves. And so we are taking 3 of our county departments, Health and Human Services, our County Free Library, and Probation, as where we are beginning to really have a meaningful equity conversation with our own employees. Our Health and Human Services Department has made fantastic progress in developing a strategic vision plan, and they are having the kinds of conversations that we want to have with all of our county employees. And it's not just on equity, it's about the harder conversations, our unrecognized biases. How do we interact with each other? What do we need to know better about ourselves and about others so we can really have a workplace that celebrates equity in a way that is meaningful? It's not just having an equity czar, it's integrating equity into everything that we do. That is our mission. So I think that's a very important step, because we can't have that conversation of our county needs to be better on equity unless we have made our own house better. I think then it's very important that we do focus on job creation. We focus on job training. We remember to engage ourselves. ourselves and include each other in what we are doing. We work hard, I have since I got in office, to reduce the barriers between our communities. I think it's fabulous this event is happening right here at the Hanna Gallery today, because one of my things that I have worked on for the last 5 years is integrating, breaking down the barriers that we have in Southern Marin. Sometimes, not 100%, it's better than it used to be, with this community and our other communities. We need to all be engaged together. We need to be thinking together about how we want to improve, how we interact, and improve our future.
This just in. How will you prevent essential public transit service from being eroded by the niche private ride-sharing enterprises?
That's a really great question. So, I sit on the Golden Gate Bridge District Board, and so I'm very plugged into issues with public transit on our buses and our ferries. I'm also on the Marin Transit Board, and we're expanding our public transit service by almost 20% this spring. The ridership on those two different forms of transit are quite different. Marin Transit, our bus services really tend to, most of our riders are folks who are really public transit dependent. Our riders on the Golden Gate ferries, more of them, and on the buses in particular, tend to be our commuters who have various options. And I think it's great that we have a multitude of both public and private options. I think that's important. But we also really need to find and keep expanding the resources that we have to make sure that our public transportation system is as best that it can be. I'm hopeful when the SMART train, I also am on that board, I'm hopeful when the SMART train starts service at the end of this year, that's going to have an impact, a demonstrable impact on our traffic and congestion problems between Marin and Sonoma County. We have a lot of folks who are heading back and forth in those ways, and we already have over 350 county employees who are said they will ride the train. For some of our residents, we talk about how do you get everybody to ride public transit. I think, to be honest about it, we have folks who will probably never get on public transit. And so for those people, it's great that we do have Uber and we have Lyft and we have alternatives. What we want to do, I think, is welcome these different opportunities, be as creative as we can, because the goal, as we all know, is to get people out of their cars, reduce our greenhouse gases, and make sure that we're taking care of our environment. So I don't see the private sector impinging on our public sector. I think it's a great addition that will hopefully get more of us out of our cars and improve our options.
So we've often heard the expression, we need as many tools in the toolbox as possible. So this is one of those kinds of questions. I think we need lots of tools that we can use for public transit, and it's where we're really lucky in terms of the buses and the ferries and the shuttle systems that we have, and we need to continue to celebrate those. I don't think there should be a conflict between what can happen in the private sector. In fact, if we could do more to encourage Uber and driverless cars or whatever we have coming down the line in terms of a future for transportation, I think are all great options for us to consider. And eventually, I think we could imagine that the way of the car, we can't quite imagine it now, but it's kind of like it'll go the way of the horse and buggy, and the person who couldn't imagine ever not having someone doing horseshoe repair, we will eventually have ways of transportation that'll make the car a thing of the past. And we need to be looking at how we can do that, either in much smaller kinds of vehicles that we are so wasteful in terms of how much space we have in the big vehicles, in our cars. And the same thing is true in terms of buses, where we have buses that people are being warned that the routes are going to discontinue because there's not enough ridership, because the buses are so big. So if we scaled everything back down to be smaller so that buses would have more frequent runs, greater points where people could be picked up or dropped off, would be a big way in terms of both being able to help school kids get use transportation, as well as going back to that earlier question about seniors and aging, and how all of us, want to have ease to be able to get to the destinations that we have. We don't want to have the bus running every 4 hours to be able to get to a doctor's appointment or to go on a shopping trip. So we need more flexibility, more points of connection with transportation.
Thank you, everyone, for the great questions. Unfortunately, we only have time for one more, and we'll look regionally for that last question. So, how do you view ABAG and Plan Bay Area 2040 update?
Well, things are really changing quickly. There's going to be a general assembly of ABAG delegates. I think it's April or May 19th. And what will be decided at that meeting is whether ABAG should be woven in what some people are referring to as a kind of hostile takeover by the Marin Transportation Commission taking over ABAG.
What is ABAG?
ABAG is the Association of Bay Area Governments. It's one of the major regional agencies that's a part of this question. So there's dozens of regional agencies, but it is the big one which had set out to say that there should be high-density housing near transportation, looking to link transportation dollars with housing dollars. So the thing about ABAG, many of us were critical of ABAG, but the thing about ABAG that we will be losing if this takeover happens, and it looks likely that it will, that there at least have been city council representatives who were appointed to, who chose one of their representatives from the Marin mayors and city council members. So Marin currently has one representative, Pat Eklund, mayor of Novato, who is a representative to ABAG. MTC, who is proposing to do the takeover in this regional agency, we have one. Steve Kinsey has been the person who has been selected from among the Board of Supervisors to be that person. I'm deeply concerned about the way in which regional agencies are undermining local control, and it is the core issue of why I oppose Measure AA, where it's becoming even more drastic that we don't have even a single county representative to the AA regional body. And so the chances for us to be able to stay knowledgeable and informed about what's happening on our behalf depends on us really working hard for citizen advocacy.
Thank you.
You know, one of the important things that came out of Plan Bay Area in our last go-round of conversations, and it did come out of citizen advocacy, was to have explicit language added to Plan Bay Area that reinforced our ability to control our local land use planning. And that was hugely important. I think certainly as a county, we spent a lot of time pushing back on some of the employment estimates, the housing estimates, increase estimates. So we tried to get more reasonable expectations and better data and better information into Plan Bay Area that truly reflected what our county is all about and the slow growth county that we have been. I, frankly have thought that Plan Bay Area they were finally catching up with Marin County. Since in 1973, in our countywide plan, we created zones to protect our agricultural lands, to protect our open space, to really focus what limited development we have in this county in our areas that are already settled, in our cities and towns, and along our 101 corridor. From my perspective, that's what Plan Bay Area is trying to do for areas like San Jose, Pleasanton, that maybe didn't think so carefully about the impact of sprawl and maybe didn't plan. So I think our county got a real jump start on the process of thinking about how do we want to handle development at our local level. Now, Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC, this is an agency that holds a lot of the purse strings for transportation dollars. And it's important what happens at that and what our relationships are with MTC so that we can continue getting resources we need to improve our transportation networks that we've been talking about. today about what we need to make our situation more beneficial for our residents. I feel strongly, that I'm being stopped right now. All right, we can talk more about that later. Thank you.
Bell. Before we begin our closing statements, I'd like to invite you to visit votersedge.org, our new partnership with Smart Voter and the League of Women Voters with voteredge.org website. Enter your street address and zip code where you will be able to see your own ballot with links to these candidates today, issues, ballot measures, and information about voting and the process. We'll also have more information on the elections, resources, and materials at marinlwv.org. The League of Women Voters welcomes both men and women members, and we hope that you will join us in our important work. We'll have a 2-minute closing statement, starting with Kate.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me, and for all of you in the audience for coming here today. So there are significant issues facing our county. Many of them we've talked about: infrastructure and traffic, climate change, an affordability crisis that affects our ability to retain and recruit the quality employees that are so important to the success of our programs and the excellence of our schools. I have the experience, the skills, and the track record to handle those issues and get things done. There are many differences between me and my opponent on where we stand on the issues and also on our grasp of the facts. I stand for housing affordability and thoughtful land use planning, for addressing climate change and protecting our bay through initiatives such as Measure AA. I stand for government accountability and continuing to rein in our pension liabilities, and for doing all that we can to address our traffic woes using every tool in the toolbox. So I do think we need to come up with another phrase, because that one's kind of tired. To really be effective in public life, you need to have an open mind. And that means listening to everyone, even those you don't agree with and who don't support you. And then you need to make a decision. Just saying no does not get the job done. I think it's also important to have a heart. I mentioned compassion earlier, and I'll give you a couple of other examples. I think we want to support childcare so parents are able to find and keep jobs. That's an important thing for our community. And I think we do need to pay $1 a month for Measure AA. This is really what is community all about? How do we find ways forward to work together and really address what our issues are in a collective way? It's not all about our street, what happens to our house, what happens on our block, not even what happens in our neighborhood. It's about how we find ways to come together. And I think Measure AA is an important step on that, and there are other steps that we can take. This election matters, and I hope you'll visit my website. Thank you.
Hold your applause, please. We have one more candidate. Susan.
So I want to thank the League as well, and for all of you for being here today. And I want to start out with picking up on that last question about the Plan Bay Area 2040, and just to say that the threat of that is that there is not representation for the citizens. One citizen from Strawberry had to go before the Board of Supervisors 15 times to try to get the item about the planned development area that had been automatically enrolled, the community had been enrolled in, before being able to get it on the agenda. That's the kind of danger that we have from regionalism that's impacting us on a daily basis. The same thing in Golden Gate Village. There were times when people could not get an audience to be able to have their wishes heard about what they wanted to have happen in their community. So my opponent, talks about being an environmentalist, but did not get the endorsement of the Sierra Club. She talks about being in favor of affordable housing, but we have at risk 500 units of housing that will be destroyed. She talks about being in favor of solving traffic problems, but has added 600 or more cars a day to our roadways. And she talks about being effective and engaging, but Dick Spotswood wrote about her part of this campaign, bringing it to a sleazy place in elections for Marin. I have the endorsement of Charles McClashen's brother, Bill McClashen, who has endorsed me for my leadership. Bob Canepa in Mill Valley has endorsed me for my integrity. Other people are stepping forward saying this is a time for change, and what we need is change that combines integrity with caring, with the citizen advocacy that has been typical of League of Women Voters. And I ask for your vote on Election Day.
Thank you very much. And thank you, live audience, for joining us at the Hannah Gallery here in Marin City. For more information, visit our website, marinlwv.org. And thank you to our participants, Susan Kirsch, Kate Sears. And for more information, please visit the website. And thank you to Susan Stomp, our timekeeper.